So I've been in this game 35, 40 years of education. I'm very fortunate that my work is my passion, and without my mom and dad's love and support, I wouldn't be able to get to do this. So thank you again for being here. This is the first time in maybe I've made hundreds of presentations across my career. This is the first time my mom and dad get to hear me.
Oh, that's really?
Wow. Much of who I am today is because of my mom and dad. I mean, from a very early age, I and my brothers and sisters were given the opportunity to live Renaissance lives. So we were in theater, we were in athletics, we traveled, we got to do so many things. And as I became a professional in education, there was an individual by the name of Howard Gardner out of Harvard, very well known for his work on multiple intelligences. And a lot of people, I feel, misunderstood Gardner's work. He said that, if you're musically inclined, that's your strength. If you're artistically inclined, that's your strength. If you're in tune with nature, that's your strength. And so in the beginning, people started to teach to those strengths and ignore the others. Well, what I think Howard Gardner was really saying is that we should acknowledge where our strengths are, but we should intentionally grow all of those intelligences so that we're balanced and we're complete and we're 360, if you will. And that's the opportunity that I and my siblings had because of the opportunities that my mom and dad gave us. So there it is. I also traveled the world from an early age. So it all started back in 11th or 12th grade, I think it was. And the French class, and I never took French in high school, but they were going to Paris. And my girlfriend was going, because she did take French. And I said, wait a minute. I grabbed my buddy, I said, look, I'm not going to pull this off on my own, but if you go with me. So we went and saw Mrs. Orloff and said, hey, could we join the trip? And she said, sure. So off we went to Paris. And that was the bug. So from that point on, I was on my way to world travels for the last 30, 40 years. I started my international teaching career in Liberia, West Africa, when it was still a pretty stable place. From Liberia, West Africa, I went to Tokyo. From Tokyo, I went to the Canary Islands, Spain. From the Canary Islands, Spain, I went to, where did I go? Geneva, Switzerland, and then up to Paris, and then to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and then to Hong Kong, and then to Qatar in the Middle East. And my last formal gig, because now I'm a full-time writer and consultant, I was the director of Bali International School. Rough life, huh? Yeah. So, but the benefit of this is that I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I tended to jump into positions probably a little bit before I was ready sometimes, and got smacked down as a result of it. But that can either finish you or you can learn from that. And that's what I did. I learned in many ways, and I had the good fortune of having some of the most amazing mentors. I mean, world famous educators. Bill and Ocean Powell, who are now recognized internationally for their work on differentiated instruction and inclusion. Robert J. Marzano, very well known out of Colorado, and the ASCD, which is a major think tank in the United States. Lucy Calkins, who is revolutionizing reading and writing instruction at the Teachers College in New York. These have now all become, if not friends, strong acquaintances of mine, right? So, when you have the opportunity to learn from so many amazing peoples, just by good fortune and the universe, then some cool things happen, right? So that's kind of who I am, and my passion now has been focused to literacy and best practice learning. What does it mean for kids to learn? And so probably about 10 years ago, being very frustrated with being in the box, in bureaucracy and systems the way they are, I decided I wanted to do some things of my own to leverage my work. And again, I've been an artist since I went to college. At about 18, 19, I started painting. And so I wanted to combine my passion for art with my work in education. And so the result is now the just recently published second editions of my two books. So one is called Phonics Things. So this is an ABC phonics learn to read book for the 21st century. It's intended to be for the school and home as a supplement to cement the school to home partnership. And anybody familiar with Shel Silverstein? Yeah. Uncle Shel? Yeah? Dr. Seuss, by chance? Yeah? Well, this is kind of in the spirit of those two. So what I've done is I've got 80 letter and letter combinations, which I'm going to call Phonics 101. Now, some people might be able to argue, well, there's actually 84. Well, I'm going to, 80 is a nice round number, so we'll stop there. You get the idea. But if I can just show you, so let's see here, a good one to show you just to get a sense of what this book's all about. Here's a good one. So this is the letter Z for wizard, right? So these paintings are 30 by 40 oils, Van Gogh style a little bit, a lot of texture and color. I give you a definition and I give you one of 8 types of figurative language at the bottom. This one happens to be metaphor. Then on this side I give you a story poem in the spirit of Uncle Shel Silverstein. And then I give you 6 words with the sound in the beginning, in the middle, in the end. And they're intentionally multi-syllabic words, multiple syllable words as much as possible. And they're intentionally academic words. And so what we've done is we've been very complete with this. And just as a little introduction, I'll read you this poem. The wacky wizard of color found pleasure in making life bold. He revealed the magic of rainbows and other delights untold. At times he changed red apples to blue, bringing giggles of silly delight. Then he would zap the white snow pink, making it seem not quite right. Just when you thought you got it straight, the wizard would throw you a curve. Life is a fabulous journey. The thing to do is keep your nerve. So these poems with the illustrations, because the story poems go way beyond the illustrations, they force the reader to infer, to visualize, to make connections and go beyond what's there. And that's critical thinking, to be able to read between the lines, put 2 and 2 together. What we also do intentionally is we expose the reader to a range of vocabulary. Tier 1 are your basic sight words, table, and, a, the, chair. Tier 2 are delicious, dandy, delight. The advanced adjectives and adverbs, nouns and verbs of a reader and a writer. And then tier 3 are your academic vocabulary. So research says that we should be exposing these kids to this kind of vocabulary from a very, very early age, from birth. So that's the essence of this book. A lot of strategies and fundamentals in the back, but I'll just connect one quick story to this. Is that, my daughters, because I was an educator and my wife's an educator as well, she's a teacher of middle school language arts now, we started reading to our daughters when they were like 2 months old, 3 months old. And we did not stop until they were 11, 12. It was a tradition for us, right, every day. So research says because we did that, my daughters entered school having heard tens of thousands of sounds of the English language. That's phonemic awareness. Turn off the lights, hear the sounds. That hardwiring of the brain makes a tremendous difference. Now, think Jungle Boy for a second. He was out there with the wolves and everything, brought out when he was 6, 7 years old, couldn't speak. Why? He never heard those sounds. Think about what's happening in Benton Harbor, or Chicago, or Detroit, or Baltimore, or Philadelphia. That's the crisis. What happens between 0 and 5, right? That's where it's at. So we're trying to be very intentional in addressing this with this book. And I'm not going to be able to explain to people how to use this. I'm not going to be able to, with my introduction, which is pretty clear and succinct, or even with some of the strategies at the back, that's not going to get it there. What's going to get it there is show, don't tell. So the next generation of this is a series which we go into production this year, is a series of video lessons that'll model how to do this. So we'll show, not tell, right? My other book, which I won't go into a lot of detail right now, is called Literacy Mats, The ABCs of Literacy, Conversing, Reading, Writing, and Presenting. But what I try to do here is bring forward this book. It's the Common Core standards, but in layman's terms. And I'll come back to that a little bit later because there's some powerful stuff in this. And just as a little note, the Common Core are perhaps the best standards we've ever had. The problem is the way they've been rolled out and the way they've been politicized. They're outstanding standards. They really are. Yeah. So that's my brief introduction. We still have about 15 minutes before the lunch comes. Are there any questions before I go into my part? Please.
When you were talking about reading to the children, it or unhelpful to sometimes read, everybody knows a little Spanish, French, or something.
Sure.
Should we read in foreign language even if they can't understand it, and we can't always interpret the whole thing, but we can all read a poem or something.
You're on point with your idea. Absolutely. Think about it. Americans struggle to speak a second language. Why? Because we're not exposed to a second language. We don't get that phonemic awareness, if you will. Now, what's happening down in the southern states is going to change that, because more and more Hispanics are coming in. And if I'm a child with my mom and dad don't speak Spanish, but I'm at the grocery store and I'm walking past all these people all day who are speaking Spanish, I'm gonna get used to those sounds. Yeah. I mean, it just used to stun me that, people in Europe can speak 4 and 5 languages. But, when you've got 4 or 5 languages around you all the time, it's as simple as that. Yeah.
Where does Ebonics fit in with that? And is it pro or con in your mind?
Have your cake and eat it too. If that's part of your culture and that's where it is and that's where it's at, fine. Have fun with Ebonics in a creative way sometimes, but make no mistake about it. There is what are standards? Standards are important. Common language, shared understanding. So grammar, all these things, it's important, right? And kids don't learn to speak proper English and grammar because they had these amazing lessons, in nouns and verbs. I've recently worked with a teacher who was just, I thought, killing the kids with nouns and verbs and compound and complex sentences in middle school, where they were 3 and 4 years behind in reading. If you want them to learn the English language, then read aloud to them. Have them read. Have them act out plays. It comes down to the simple theme of exercise. If we don't speak English, or if we have broken grammar, but you give us a script, two-person play, right? And you give us a script at our level of just right learning level, if you will, and you play the part and I play the part, and we play those parts 20, 30 times, and we continue to do 20 plays that year at about that level where our English is at, guess what we'll start to do? Because it's coming out of our mouth, we'll start to speak that way. I mean, it's amazing how research makes sense sometimes, Yeah. Another question, please.
What about when you bring that little baby home, just 2 days
Yeah.
after, you sing to her.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They hear words, but they also hear, and in fact, my grandma, who didn't live with me, but she spoke Polish, and I could still remember Kotek, meaning cat.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of the product line called Baby Einstein?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. I've got a little, infant 6 months old, rocking him a little bit. And I might be singing a lullaby to him or something, but then all of a sudden I'll just stop and I'll say to that child, you are right now, this experience with you is the most indelible thing I've ever had. Indelible. And I syllabatize it. If parents were informed about the power of just taking a word a day, like indelible or resolution, I'll read to my kindergartners, and the 5 elements of any piece of fiction is character, setting, conflict, resolution, and plot. So every time I read a story to my kindergartners, I'm done, I'll say, okay, here we go. Resolution. Who's got the resolution? Boom. All their hands go up. What is it? Well, he decided to share after all, and sharing's a powerful thing. I said, that is the resolution. So guess what? Do I want to test him on that? No. But do I want to expose him to that word? Absolutely. Yeah. So, another question, please.
You're taking me back to my whole career as an elementary guidance counselor.
Fantastic.
And the visual compared to my daughter doing all of the things we're talking about to my granddaughter, and now she's 8 years old and she's read Harry Potter twice, and all of that's wonderful. But my visual images of all the minorities that we tried to help,
right,
and how physically they took care of their children as well as they could, and they would be on their hip and they would be holding them, and never a sound, never a sound. And the thing that has helped the most last 30, 40 years to overcome that that has helped is Head Start and 4-year-old Head Start. And then the funding goes, here and there for that. Do you agree that Head Start is what matters?
Oh, absolutely. But Head Start is limited.
Yeah.
I mean, they say today, we're going to talk a little bit later about the difference between teaching and learning. And what is a teacher compared to a facilitator who engages kids in learning and through a gradual release of responsibility guides them to self-direct their own learning, right? So usually here's the knowledge and here's the student, the teacher stands right here. Get out of the way. Get out of the way right now and let the kids go right to it. So while Head Start is an incredibly important thing, especially short term, what's the more empowering thing is that we educate, we inform and educate and do it in very entertaining ways for our mass public, for our parents, for everybody, for all kids, like what it is you have to learn and experience and do and enjoy in those early years. So all the things I talked about, what does Head Start do? Head Start allows children to socialize, that's powerful, but they also intentionally expose kids to words like indelible and read to them every day. Research says we should read 3 books a day to elementary students. How do you fit that in? Well, you can fit it in, but 3 different times a day you read to kids, read to kids, read to kids. And if I understand the science of a read aloud and how to do it effectively, an effective master teacher is able to walk into a classroom that one teacher can't even begin to control and have those students sitting spellbound within 5 minutes and just totally engaged and engrossed in the story. It's a science. There's a little art to it, and you want to have that art, right? But it's a science. Yeah. I mean, I've had people tell me before, well, we can't all be a Brian Kissman. I said, heaven forbid. But you can be yourself in a more scientific, professional way that'll be very, very successful for you. Yeah. So another question, another thought.
Which country you were in did you feel was doing the best job of educating young children?
Wow. Wow, no one's ever asked me that before. I can tell the one I enjoyed living in the most was Tokyo, Japan. Okay, but I will tell you right now, although I hadn't lived there, I'll tell you the countries that are doing the best job of educating. Scandinavia. Finland, we're going to talk about this in the presentation. What Finland is doing is revolutionary. And it's not that hard to implement and make happen. And, we need to do it. We need to do it, yeah.
What do you think of the need for a national head of education like Repeat.
All right, so the question is, what do you think about the need for a cabinet level person or a czar of education like Arnie Duncan? The opportunity of that position, if empowered to lead change, is off the charts. I don't know of anybody to date that's taken advantage of that position. And in my opinion, with all due respect to Arnie, he has not. He has done nothing except stay in the box.
Well, he's done a lot, but it hasn't been positive.
Well, yeah. He's just stayed in the box. But to that said, we haven't seen much of Arnie. Obama really hasn't empowered him. And I don't know if he has the capacity to provide that kind of leadership.
He gave him a fortune. What do you mean? He gave him a fortune.
Yeah.
In dollars to give to those districts.
Right.
Who marched to his plan, which was charter schools.
Right. Well, you'll know better than I because I've been overseas for these years. But yes, yes, the money, some of the money is there. It's how we spend the money, I think, that's been in error to a great extent. And since you said that magic word, charter schools, I'll just throw 2 cents out on that for a moment. I've worked with a lot of charter schools. And in theory, on paper, cutting away red tape and empowering people to take control and do some innovative things is good. And I think some charter schools have really made a difference and opened some new doors. But in the end, it's been a wash as far as success, but it's really been a loss in the total picture. One of the things you'll hear me talk about again in the presentation a little bit later is teacher salaries. It's not right. It's not right. It's not right. It's not right. You know, and we have to do something about that. So, another question of thought. I don't want to go too far into some of these because it's all part of the.
Living in the States again now?
I am, and well, that's good. You said, what am I doing? So now we're back to topic. So I came back. I came back a year ago to like, okay, I'm going to do only my work now, and I'm going to launch out and get it going. And you know, I've been out of the network for so long. You know, I just kind of lost my leverage to get into this conference or go here and get, you know, hired as a consultant here or there. And so last fall, I once again went over to Tokyo for 4 months to help a school there. And then I came back, and the last 6 months I've been with Benton Harbor Schools. A very interesting experience that I can talk to you a little bit about with all due respect. But I am back. I do want to stay, and I've had a major breakthrough recently that I'm very, very excited about. And it once again gives you faith in serendipity and synergy and what the universe can bring if you stay true to who you are, right? So I recently reconnected with an old high school chum, Bill Sarabica, who is a great rags to riches story. He went down to New Orleans 2 weeks after Katrina, bought a food truck, and started feeding people. And did well, and then networked and networked and networked. And 10 years later, Bill now owns 3 of the top jazz clubs in New Orleans. He owns a beautiful bed and breakfast that's rated number 2 out of 150 on TripAdvisor. And he's doing some other major investments. And I just said, Bill, can I come down and hang with you for a little while so I can explore some new avenues down there, because some really groundbreaking things are happening with education down there. 90% of the schools are charter now in the public because the public system had fallen so far apart. Something had to be done. Charter was the model that was available to make some things happen. But anyway, Bill and I started talking, and Bill has significant means these days. So he says, as a businessman, you don't even know what you got here, Brian. I'm going to give you my love and support. So he is now my backer, my investor, and I leave tomorrow morning for New Orleans. Wow. Yeah. So I'll be down there pretty intensively for the next 6 to 12 months, but my goal is to, continue to come back up to Michigan and do some work and work out of New Orleans a little bit, and then nationally. This year I'll be speaking at 4 major conferences. I'll be at the International Reading Association Conference at Peoria, Illinois. Thousands of educators will be in attendance. I'll be a speaker at the International Montessori Conference in Sarasota, Florida, which I'm very excited about because anybody know a woman by the name of Tanya Reiskind? Dr. Reiskind out of Sawyer? Yeah. So Tanya is a very good friend, and we worked together at Benton Harbor this year, and she said, Brian, your work has Montessori just written all over it. So I said, that's fantastic. So we're going to collaborate more together. And then I'll also be at in October, at the last minute, I got in as a sponsor and a presenter at the Louisiana Charter Schools Conference, just because that's what's happening in Louisiana right now. And then finally, I'll be a speaker at the National School Boards Association Conference in Boston next April. So, yeah, so now I'm just kind of getting back into the network, and so just a lot of things are coming together, and we're pretty excited. And by the way, ultimately, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, is that both books are going to be turned into iPad and Android apps, and we're also going to do a series of literacy video lessons in the spirit of Khan Academy. Is anybody familiar with Khan Academy? Yeah. So no one's doing the good stuff in literacy yet with that concept of video lessons online, and we want to take it to the next level. I think Sal Khan has done an amazing thing with this site, but it's still a bit of a lecture mode. We want to model learning in a social context with teen teaching and with a cohort of kids. So again, it's about show, don't tell. Yeah, so that's where we're heading. Yeah. Yes?
Could you show us and tell us more about the literacy maps?
Yeah, so again, that's part of the presentation, but I'll just say this. You know, they say it's about reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Well, I don't like to say speaking and listening. I like to say conversation and presentation. So very few authors have written about being explicit and intentional in teaching conversation. So I'm the author of what we call the 8 traits of conversation. So I'm going to be very intentional at teaching my students how to be active listeners. There's one of the traits. How to control self, both in terms of how much you say, when you say something, and how often you say something in a group. Right? Yeah, Americans, we have an issue with that sometimes, you know? We like to be heard, but sometimes we don't practice being active listeners as well as we could. So, you know, it's about being intentional with that. You talked about presentation earlier. So I'm also the author of the 4 traits of presentation. So is that anything groundbreaking new? No, but I simplify it and be very intentional with it. So, you know, if you ask around schools today, 95% of schools will tell you that their kids get to make 2 or 3 presentations a year. It should be hundreds of presentations a year. Why am I able to stand in front of you and present the way I do and not get nervous or just, Brian, you've got a gift. You know, you seem to be so comfortable up there on stage. Well, it's because Mom and Dad had me in The Sound of Music when I was 7. And then in 30 plays again for the next 30 years I acted. So it's like dribbling a basketball. You show me how once, I got that. Now the only thing that's going to get me there is that I do it, which I also did for hours upon hours upon hours. So I'm a pretty good basketball player. But it's about time on task. So if you want to be a great presenter, you have to present. You want to be a great conversationalist, you have to converse. And if you want to be a great reader, you have to read. If you want to be a great writer, you have to write. Do you want to know how many teachers, let alone kids and adults, cannot write a good essay? So how are you going to teach somebody to write an essay if you can't write one yourself? So how do I learn to write an essay? Every school year I write at least 20 essays. I write a couple a month. So it's automaticity, they say, automatic. I don't even think about it. I know a boxes and bullets outline. I know a thesis. I know my topic sentences. I know my supporting details. I know my closure. I know that outline. I talked to a student recently who was a senior at Purdue University. He was working at the Ralph Lauren outlet shop in Michigan City. Very handsome young black man, very articulate, well-spoken, seemed very educated. It was winter, nobody was there. We started talking a little bit. And I said, well, you know, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm going to probe a little bit, make you think. Well, come to find out, he could not articulate what a thesis statement to me was. He was a senior at Purdue University. He could not articulate the difference between a thesis and a topic. You know, and if right now you're saying, darn, I don't know if I could either, well, that's okay. That's our education system. These are the ABCs of literacy. So what I'm trying to do is make very user-friendly and simple these fundamentals of reading, writing, conversation, and presentation through this book. And so this is literally the Common Core. I have taken it off the shelf and put it into the hands of students as a learning tool. So I'll guarantee you right now, if kids use this, and I'll explain why, because you're going to say, well, how can you do that? This is intended to be used in every grade, 3rd through 12th. Well, wait a minute. There's a big gap there. What's the difference? I'll explain that a little bit later, but it can be, and it's been done successfully. But what happens then is that these fundamentals become a habit of mind. Just like when I say to you, trick question, but you're going to be able to answer it quickly. No pressure. What are the first 3 letters of the alphabet?
ABC.
Oh, that's called automaticity. There's no thought involved. So if I ask you to expound upon the character of a story, the main character of a story in a piece of literature, you ought to be able to go 3 or 4 sentences in depth about that, and I'll do that for you a little bit later, without even thinking about it. But right now, probably 5 or 10%, maybe 20% at most, of students at New Buffalo and St. Joe, which are 2 finest schools in the area perhaps, one might argue, Stevensville, also a very good school. Many of the schools in Berrien County are very good, but I would argue that many of the kids can't do that, cannot do that. So what are the new ABCs of literacy? They're the Common Core, but they're really literacy maths in user-friendly terms. Today's title of the presentation is America's Literacy Crisis, Big Ideas and Research Evidence. And that's kind of the cool thing that's happened in the last 20, 30 years to education. It really has become a profession in significant ways compared to what it was, when I was growing up, I think. And data is king, as it is in everything today, right? So the data and the facts don't lie. So we'll talk about some big ideas today and research evidence. So again, this comes back to my work with literacy maps and the Common Core standards. Pillars of literacy for lifelong learning. If we want to learn to read, we read. If we want to learn to write, we must write. If we want to learn to converse, we must converse. If we want to learn to present, we must present. So let me just put this in context and help you visualize a little bit what this looks like in again, my company is called Learn on Point. And we say we're on point with what's most important, learning to learn, so that we can self-direct our own learning. And I believe that you first and foremost learn to learn through the pillars of literacy. So read to read. So in our program, the way we implement the Common Core standards, a teacher will model today's lesson on reading comprehension. So it might be readers think deeply about the character's desires and struggles. That's the essence of any story. Let me show you what that looks like, my friends, my students. I'll open a passage. And I'm reading this passage about Eugene, who just bullied a first grader, even though he was in 5th grade. And I'll read that passage, and then I'll stop and I'll say, wait a minute. Desires and struggles. Well, I know why he's struggling. It's because he's angry. I mean, he comes back to school every day angrier than ever, even though by the end of the day it seems he's cool. So, he is definitely struggling, and he's showing that through his bullying. He's angry at the world. But you know what? I don't know what his desires are. I don't know what's causing this. I don't know what it is he wants. So, as I read on, I'm going to think more deeply about what his desires are. And maybe then I'll be able to figure out what the struggle is. What do you guys think? Turn and talk. You see what I just did? I modeled kind of critical thinking. I'm making meaning as a reader. But I only did it for how long? 120 seconds. I didn't try to explain. Now listen, when you read today, I want you to go out there and I want you to think about the character's desires and struggles. Now a desire is something that somebody wants. A struggle is how they have a hard time and they stressed out about it. You're not going to learn, but you will learn from me modeling. And then I give you an immediate opportunity to turn and talk. And you know what my kids do after they get this routine? I'm going to tell you why he's struggling. I mean, it's because he just wants friends. That's his desire. And all of a sudden, these kids are using these big, powerful words. So we model 3 times, turn and talk. Model, turn and talk, model, turn and talk. That's called the mini lesson. Now I say, readers, once again, every story's got a main character with desires and struggles across the events of the story. As you go off to read today, think deeply about your main character. What are their desires? What are their struggles? Readers off to read. And now they go, even though it's a 4th grade classroom, some of them are reading 2nd or 3rd grade level books, some are reading 5th, 6th grade level books. We put them in what we call their zone of proximal development, that just right level that's a little bit challenging, but they can still read fluently, and they read for an hour a day. I'm going to read to learn to read. Same way, write to write. Same routine, same process, but the 4 major genres of writing. Narrative, your personal narrative, you're writing about an experience you've had in your life, or your short story. Both fiction, both narrative. Non-narrative, the essay and the report. And there's a process to writing. First I plan and I prepare and I get my ideas down, I take notes, do a little research. Then I write my draft after I've had my outline put together. Then once I've worked my draft, I'm going to leave it alone for a day or 2, come back, revise it, see how I can add some figurative language or rearrange the sentences and fix the organization, fix that sentence fluency so it kind of flows a little bit. Keep doing that, draft, revise, draft, revise, draft, revise, and I'm done. But to those 4 genres, those are the 4 big genres. If I can write a personal essay and a short story, if I can write an essay and a report, I'm going to rock it. But guess what? Our kids might be asked to write 3 personal narratives a year, 1 short story a year, 1 essay and 1 report if they're lucky. It's got to be 20 30, 40 times a year. That's all I do is I write compositions. If the kids are going to learn to write, what do they have to be able to do? Write. So let's write to write. Every day they're going to read for an hour, they're going to write for an hour. Converse to converse. So per my 8 traits of conversation, and throughout literacy mats, we use mnemonics, visuals, and I use geometrics. So there's an octagon for 8 traits of conversation. There they are. Just like A, B, C, D, F, G, you're going to know what does it mean to be respectful in a conversation? What does it mean to be prepared? What does it mean to be an active listener? What does it mean to be clear? What does it mean to inquire and probe? To show comprehension, to check understanding, to control self. What do these mean? So just like we share a common understanding of ABC, from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th to 7th to 8th to 9th to 10th to 11th to 12th grade, as you use this as a supplement, this becomes automatic ABC. And we become great conversationalists. And I make it simple. Let's go to active listening for a moment. So I'm going to look the person I'm speaking to in the eye, and when they tell me, hey, have you seen a good movie lately? Tell me about it. Oh, yeah, I went and saw Transformers last week. Really? Now, typically what we might do is, yeah, you liked it? Yeah, you said, oh yeah. Well, I went to see Peter Pan. Now, all of a sudden, I'm talking about what I want to talk about. I want to talk about me. That's not active listening. So if I'm going to show you respect and I'm going to show you that I care and I value what you've got to say, I'm going to say, well, what did you like about Transformers? Well, why do you think that? Why do you think they did it that way? Well, so you just talked about, the Transformer. What was the most amazing thing about the Transformer? So I've got a real good friend in high school, Mike Anderson, and he's actually coming into town tonight to visit me. He's going to drive down to New Orleans with me, help me make the drive. And everybody, I was okay. I was kind of popular in school a little bit, sometimes not. But Mike was always popular. Everybody loved Mike. And years later, after I did my research in this work, I realized why. To this day, Mike is the most natural, amazing, active listener on the planet. He just keeps asking you questions, So everybody walks away and says, I like talking to that guy, So if we're doing the reading lesson that I talked about, where I'm modeling, now you're going to go off to read. Now I've got you 3 are at the same level, so you're reading the same book. So on the 4th day, you're going to plan and you're going to get together and you're going to have a book club conversation and you're going to apply the traits of conversation to make meaning. Because all of a sudden we get to the heart of the conversation and I finally say, well then what's your interpretation of this chapter? And you look at me and you say, chocolate. I'm like, really? And I look and I say, I hadn't thought about that, but that makes sense to me. I see that. That's powerful. And you look at me and say, well, if that's not your interpretation, what do you think? And I say, well, this is going to blow you away. I got peanut butter, man. It's all about peanut butter. All of a sudden we get real big. We look at each other and we say, we've got Reese's peanut butter cups. So you see, that's a synthesis of knowledge. And I learn from you and you learn from me when we're active listeners. And we apply the art of conversation for lifelong learning. It'll grow you as a learner, professionally and socially. We converse to converse. Give kids time to talk. But structure it and guide it. Present to present. Again, what is volume and clarity? Have I demonstrated volume and clarity today? I think so. What is fluency, expression, and pace? Pun intended. Use a little wait time, a little dead time sometimes to pull your listeners in. Body language and eye contact. When I'm up in front of 2,000 people as I was as the keynote speaker at the National Charter School Conference about 8 years ago, because I had a major contract with Grand Valley State University's Charter Schools office. They had some failing charter schools they wanted to close down, so they asked me to come and try and save them. So as a result of my work, I was invited to be a keynote speaker there. So here's 3,000 people. Every single one of those people thought I was talking directly to them because I had 9 zones. I had the right, my right, which was front, center, back, the middle, front, center, back, the left, front, center, back. And I intentionally would come down front, then I'd go back long, then I'd come to the middle over here, then I'd come to the front here, then I'd go to the back there, then I'd come back to the front here. And they all thought, man, he recognized me, So Again, our kids, we have a routine for presentation in the classroom. Now, we have at least 10 major presentations a year in our approach to balanced literacy and in the way we implement the Common Core. But kids present to present. So just before lunch, just before recess, 3, 4, 5 kids a day. So by the end of the week, everyone got a chance to make a 1 to 3 minute presentation. They had to come up front of the class. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'd like to talk to you about ladybugs. And they'd make a 3-minute presentation on ladybugs. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that little pitch. And so everyone applauds. And now the routine is the person presenting says, thank you very much. Does anybody have feedback for me? Yes, please. And you'll raise your hand and you'll say, you'll start with a positive. Per those 4 traits of presentation, so they become an ABC common language. You'll say, you know what? Your fluency was beautiful today, Brian, and it usually is, and your expression was like really powerful. But you didn't change your pace throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to recognize you first with a positive for your expression and fluency, but vary a little bit. Slow down, speed up, play with that for effect. Be silent once in a while. We know about that. Work on that pace a little bit. I say, well, thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate it. Anybody else? I take one more person. I say, okay, thank you for the feedback. And everyone applauds again. I sit down, next person comes up. So there's time on task once a week, 40 times a year minimum, that I get to make a 3-minute presentation. Where am I going to be from September to June? I'm going to be a presenter. Okay? So that's what I'm all about. That's what the Literacy Mats is all about. Making the Common Core simple, user-friendly. So here's some data. Less than 30% of children arrive to school truly ready to learn to read. We talked about Head Start earlier. Less than 30% of our kids arrive to school ready to learn to read. In other words, only 30% of parents are really doing what they should do to read to their kids and teach them the alphabet and to sound out words. When students are not reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade, the chances of them graduating from high school is 60%. Only 60% of kids not at grade level at the end of 3rd grade graduate. Only 30% of grade 4, grade 8, and grade 12 students are highly proficient readers. Now you say, wait a minute, man. Come on. Brian, Stevensville, St. Joe, New Buffalo, Lakeshore, Bridgman. These kids got a lot of kids who can read. Yeah, they can read. But reading fluently doesn't mean that you're a proficient reader. Can you make meaning? Can you give me interpretations? Can you summarize? Sorry, I went to New Buffalo and it was a great community to grow up in, but I went to Grand Valley State and I sat in on Soc 101 with this Jackie Johnson, who was the hippest, coolest professor I ever had. I was like totally, in love with her. And I'd sit in her class and we'd talk and debate, and then she'd say to write this essay, and I'd go write it, and she'd say, dude, come here. I want you at my office at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I said, man, you got some great ideas in class, but you have no clue about how to write. She said, go get a tutor, I was asked to write one essay and at New Buffalo High School, and my mom did a great job with it. Do you remember what we wrote about? Flying saucers, UFOs, kitchen table. Mom sat on the right, I sat on the left, and she kind of made me write it as much as I could, but then she said, well, no, maybe you better add this and do this, and so, but without her sitting there pushing me through that, I was more about the sports and the other things. So highly proficient, that's the difference, right? That's the difference. 35% of 18 to 24-year-olds are enrolled in university college today. Only 35% of our kids in this country can afford or feel enabled to go to college. That's wrong. That's wrong, right? So when you make decisions about your votes in the future, make good decisions. 50%, and only 55% of kids that end up in university and college finish and get their degrees. A lot of times because they can't afford to keep going, or because they get in for a year or two and realize, I can't do it. Okay? So now here's me being very transparent and open about who I am and what a perfect example I am that turned out the right way because I did have the continued support of my parents and my family and my village. So I went off to college completely unprepared to go to college, but I was going to college because it was kind of a cool thing to do, and my older sister went, and I got up there, and that was the mid-'70s, and I went up there and partied my little butt off that first year, in all kinds of ways. And so I'm going through, it's a 3-semester school, and I'm in my 3rd semester, and I realized one day sitting in class, dude, you're messing up. And I actually sat at the back of this lecture and a couple tears rolled down my eyes. It's like, you can't mess up like this anymore, man. So I went back to my room, packed up my bags, came home, and I just said, Mom and Dad, it ain't going well up there, man. I just got to come home for a while. So I got a job at Continental Can making the tops to Coca-Cola cans. Big money, man. I could go out and get a new car, buy all this, all that. But I did about 3 months of that and realized that, I just can't do this. So I went home and said, Mom and Dad, I got to go back. I need one more chance. And I went back and I had a whole different attitude. And, I just started to be successful and I got through it, and now I've got a master's degree and I've written 2 books, but had I not had a family that was in a position to support me, then I would have been in these stats right here. So, powerful data, yes? Teachers. If teachers are number 1, if the student has a highly effective teacher 3 years in a row, the academic achievement is exceptional. Like if I have a teacher in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grades, and all 3 of them were stars, I'm good to go for years to come. But if I get a good teacher in 1st grade, but then I got a so-so one in 2nd, and especially if I got a so-so one in 2nd and 3rd, I lose a lot of the gains that I got from that 1st grade teacher. Master teachers, content, methods, rapport. So let's go to writing. If I'm going to be a master teacher, I make it real simple when I train teachers. I said, you are a 5th grade teacher. You have got to teach your kids to write a good composition, a good essay. Can you write one? Sorry, but I got to ask, can you write one? 50% of the teachers cannot that I've worked with. So, teaching doesn't ask you to write essays. It's not part of your profession, So if you're going to be a teacher of writing, you've got to be able to write it. Methods. Make no mistake, the modeling that I talked to you about, don't teach me anymore, show me how. Make it a mini lesson. Don't teach for more than 5-10 minutes, and then let kids go off, and you either work with them one-on-one or in small groups and coach them, right, and guide them. So the science behind best practice methodology today is solid. It's not a fad. It's basically called the workshop approach, and you model, and you engage kids in learning, self-directed learning with a gradual release of responsibility. It's off the charts, what we know. But these 2, you can be a PhD in these 2, and they're not worth anything if you don't have that. You've got to have that connection with kids. You've got to affirm them and celebrate them and encourage them. But it's hard in schools today, especially when I'm a 1st grade teacher and I'm in my 1st year and I got 28 kids and they're all impoverished. Set up for failure from day 1. I personally had that experience with a kid I was trying to train. So teachers are number 1. And you get what you pay for. And I'm a good example of that. Again, I was saying earlier, when I got out of college and went to teach, I had great rapport with kids, but I didn't have much of this, after 4 years at Grand Valley. So it wasn't until I was about 35 that I kind of no, I want to get in this game, and I started to really become more professional. Best practice. So again, we know it works today, but probably only 20% of schools are employing it because change is so difficult. Change is so difficult to bring about. Teachers are resistant, they're defensive, they don't want to be coached. Principals don't want to hold them accountable because it just kicks up the dust too much. Time, that's nobody's fault but the systems. Teachers are with kids all day, you're tired, you're burnt. You don't want to sit and go to another training at the end of a long day. So one of the big things we did when I flipped a school in Qatar was on Wednesdays we sent kids home at noon, and I empowered the teachers for 3 hours to collaborate in their professional teams to study best practice. And the rule was you have to be studying a best practice, some strategies, but it always has to be done in correlation to samples of student work. So if you're going to talk about how to do a better job of teaching writing, then you bring in samples of writing from your low kids, your medium your kids, your high kids. You talk with each other about the best practice you employed, and you see what the results were, and you start to debate and analyze yourself and how can we do better. My teachers, there were 2,000 students at this school, over 100 teachers. We had to go into accreditation, so we had to take this time to start working on like paperwork and stuff. Oh, want to talk about a war? Like, you gave that to us, you're not taking it away from us now. It was powerful. It's like getting them to do it in the first place was a challenge, but once we got them into it, they were like, we're going to string you up if you keep taking away our days, because you gave them to us and we love them. But again, that was sending kids home for a half day in the middle of the week, which was a very hard sell to our parents. Very hard sell. So teaching versus modeling and engaged learning, we talked about, again, the Common Core standards. Common Core are very brief. Everything is through the lens of literacy. So, for example, you teach science in the middle school. At least from middle school down, that's not your first job, is to deliver science content anymore, even though you're a science teacher. Your first job is to teach nonfiction reading intelligence. Your second job is to teach nonfiction writing proficiency, essays and reports. Your third job is to facilitate kids to get into powerful conversations about weather patterns and big ideas in science. Reading, writing, conversation, presentation. And let the kids make presentations about what they learned in science. That's your first job. There was a study years ago called the 90-90-90 case study. Did you hear about this one? No. Okay. All of a sudden, there was a pattern across the United States in the 80s. All these inner city schools were failing miserably, except there were some that were just rocking it out the park. How'd they do it? So they started to look for patterns, did a little bit of a meta-analysis, we call it. And they found this. 90% of the schools were poverty, free and reduced lunch. 90% of the kids in these schools were minority, yet 90% of the kids in these schools were proficient or higher in the standardized tests. What happened? They said, we'd stop teaching science and social studies. We taught reading and writing and numeracy. And we taught it and we taught it and we taught it. But every time we taught nonfiction reading and writing, we intentionally covered our science and social studies content. So those kids actually even outperformed the other kids on the standardized science and social studies test. It's all about, that's what the Common Core is about. Through the lens of literacy, we call it. Through the lens of literacy. So, Common Core is good stuff. The Common Core is very brief, so it assumes that the teachers know their stuff. That's not always the case. And I'm not being disparaging of teachers, not at all. The system has failed them, right? The system has failed them. Finland. Now here's where it gets cool. Marshall Plan, master's degree, literacy and numeracy expertise, professional pay and respect. In the 1980s, Finland was way down in the middle of the pack in literacy around the world, academic achievement. Now they're number one, and they always compete with South Korea and Singapore. And how do they do it? Well, South Korea and Singapore is drill, 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 drill. I go to study 12, 13, 14 hours a day. Finland's much like the US. Recess, hang out, let's do some creative stuff. So how is Finland at the top now? In the 80s, they set a 20-year plan. And they said within the next 20 years, every facility in this country will be like St. Joe's and New Buffalo's. State of the art. And now that's what's happening in Finland. State of the art learning facilities. Every teacher must have a master's degree before they can have a classroom on their own. All right? Every teacher, in addition to that master's degree, must have a very intensive literacy and numeracy certification and training. So every teacher in Finland is like myself, an expert in literacy, right? They really know their stuff. And then in a socialist country, starting salaries are 65 grand a year and up, upwards of $150,000 a year. In 1+ generations, everything changed in Finland. Powerful stuff, huh? Now, on the internet these days, on Facebook, you'll see this one come up. Education in Finland, education in America. Free universal child care preschool until the age of 7. There's your Head Start. Free universal child care in preschool until the age of 7 in Finland. 60% of poor kids get no preschool. United States. No private schools, equitable funding for all schools. Private schools for the rich, public schools for the poor. That's a bit of a generalized statement, you know, and somebody could debate that, and I would accept that debate. But the bottom line is, look at Benton Harbor and look at St. Joe. The river still divides. There is no excuse that Benton Harbor has the school facilities they've got in a country as wealthy as the United States of America. And if we can't do this across the United States and in every major impoverished city in this country, we ought to rebuild the school systems. You know, I'm sorry, but it does make a difference. It does. Teachers paid the same as doctors and lawyers in Finland, 65 to 150 grand a year. Teachers paid as little as possible. That's the biggest problem with charter schools. They're about busting the unions. Now, the unions got some issues that they need to address. Like one year I took over a principal in public school in Michigan, and I had a teacher who was just not up to the game. Sat at his desk all day long and did absolutely nothing. Literally. And the union protected him. That's not right.
Can I interject here, Dr.
Please.
Brian, there was some administrator someplace along the line that dropped the ball.
It shouldn't be so hard for the administrator to do what they've got to do. All right? It's a balance, right? On the other hand, you know, teachers, you know, I think, from what my understanding is and what I've read, and this was a while back, but I think the two largest teachers unions in the United States would agree to do away with tenure if teachers were guaranteed starting salaries of $65,000 a year. I remember quoting one of them once. You know, I think there's going to have to be a compromise there, but teachers have to be held accountable, but teachers have to be respected and paid as professionals. Yeah.
Well, but I would agree with her that I have negotiated a lot of contracts with
Right.
unions,
Yep.
and it was always in place that if the evaluations were there, tenure would never protect somebody, and the union
I
would
agree.
not protect them.
I agree.
So administrators who do not do their job as far as having evaluations on record is the reason why you have a teacher sitting there all day long doing nothing. Because if the evaluation was there,
Absolutely.
that teacher would be gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you have to work 4 years before they consider it. And if you don't show your cards in 4 years, or you don't help improve that teacher
Right.
in 4 years.
So we shouldn't be having the problem we're having in the first place.
Thank you.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I worked with a school district recently, and the state came in and was supervising and so forth, and you know, right in front of a whole room of people, the state ripped into the administrator. Wait a minute. We're 3/4 of the way through the year, and you don't have a single write-up on any one of these teachers after the scores and the results we've had? That's not their problem, that's yours. You're absolutely right, yeah. So, but you know, charters, we're starting teachers at 35, 40 grand a year. That's not right. The salaries are going backwards right now. That's not right. That's not right. Most students never take a standardized test in Finland. High-stakes standardized tests every year. There's two types of assessments: summative, which are these standardized tests, and then formative. Now, the formative assessment informs the teacher. It's a diagnostic. So, for example, for all the Common Core standards that I've got in here, at the back of the book here, I have some what I call graphic organizers and rubrics. So look at this here. This is for writing a summary of a nonfiction piece. First, you give me your subject and the central purpose of this piece in your own words. Now you tell me the golden W's and H's of a journalist. Who or what did what, where, when, why, and how. You take your notes, right? And then down here, now you breathe life into that factual statement by telling me what you notice, think, and realize about this. This is your very personal thing. Now, if I write to this, 10, 20 times a year from 3rd grade through 12th grade, this is going to be so automatic for me to write a summary. I went to Grand Valley State Universities. I didn't have a sense of confidence to write a summary. I'd write it one way with this time and one way another time. You can't leave out some of these fundamental basic things. And then what a rubric is, again, is do you score yourself with a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? And so you give the criteria there. So not only do I learn to self-evaluate myself and get my peers to self-evaluate me, but I know consistently that the teachers are evaluating me from 3rd to 4th to 5th for the same tool. So you say, well, how can you use this 3rd through 12th grade? Well, it's at a 3rd or 4th grade reading level, but the depth of it goes to lifelong learning. It goes beyond. This is very innovative. No one's done this before, right? I'm just stating that as a fact. So, and we'll come back to this more. Yeah, and so highest ranked students in the world failing in international student rankings.
Can I ask you another question?
Please.
You know, we see these comparisons all the time.
Yep.
Right? And I know in the U.S. we test every 3-year-old child, no matter how good, how high they score versus how low they, a special ed student.
Sure.
I taught in international schools for 12 years.
Wonderful.
I know that sometimes they only select, say, Germany.
That's right.
They do the hammer and saw department. After 8th grade, they part company with people.
That's right.
We're comparing with the creme de la creme.
Yes.
And we're getting the whole basket full.
Right. Yeah.
So I take some of those genres.
Absolutely. It's an apples and oranges type thing.
Yeah.
But there's some significant things to glean from this that, and we all agree. Take this as a generalization with a pinch of salt for where the truth is, where it's not. But at the end of the day, this is the United States of America. We could be doing so much better.
And we know where these people go to graduate school.
Yeah.
These foreigners come here for our graduate.
There you go. No, listen,
Few things right.
where America is still second to none in the world is the number of innovators and creative thinkers we produce. No country even is in the ballpark with the number of patents and inventions and innovations that the United States of America does have. It's just, unfortunately, there's an underclass that's becoming larger and larger that's just being left out of it. It's just being left out of it. So, again, we're on point. That's actually a bullseye and somebody reading a book at the same time. And so we say we're on point with what's most important, learning to learn. And again, reading intelligence is a driving force in learning. Reading intelligence is a driving force in learning. So conversation to build and shape understanding, reading to make meaning, writing to convey meaning, presentation to inform, educate, and entertain. If I set my sights on making that happen with each and every student, that's the priority right there. That and basic numeracy and a little bit of problem solving, we're gonna do some things in education like we've never done before. That's my argument. All right? That's my argument. And so this is the ABC book for the 21st century phonics things. Again, I explained it to you already, but latitude, longitude, language, illustrator, illustration, milliliter, parallel, powerful, swell. I'll show you fun ways to do that with a 3 and a 4-year-old. It's all about phonemic awareness, right? The poems, it's got a cadence, it's got a beat, the phonemic awareness, exposure. But again, if I use this book in innovative, creative ways from kindergarten right through 5th grade, it's going to be there. Kids are going to be there. So, indelible illustrations, figurative language, zany story poems, and multi-syllable word lists. And then the pillars of literacy. Now, I will talk to this one a little bit more because the whole book is in this idea or spirit. So this is the section on reading fiction, right? And this is really what I call a recursive application tool. Recursive, repeated use over the years. So, character. Now, if I flip the page, setting will be bold. If I flip the page again, conflict will be bold. I have 25 questions here that I worked on for almost 10 years. I would argue that there are no other questions. When it comes to fiction, you could phrase it a different way, but this will basically allow you to deeply analyze the character, setting, the conflict, the resolution, the plot, which I think could be the common language for the 5 elements of fiction, right? So I give you an enduring understanding. Characters' desires and struggles reveal the author's purpose I can't read.
Meaning.
Meaning. So in other words, if you analyze any piece of literature and you think deeply about that main character and who they are and what their desires and struggles are, you're going to be able to lift the gist or the meaning of the big idea, the message of the story. That's an enduring understanding that'll apply to infinite number of pieces of literature that you read. But if I hear that in 3rd or 4th grade, I get that a little bit. But then I hear it again with 25 books I read in 4th grade, and then again with 25 books I've read in 5th grade, then again with 25 books I've read in 6th grade, all the way to Kill a Mockingbird and An Old Man by the Sea, Hemingway, then this becomes habit of mind. And then here are what I call learning points. So those are your Common Core standards in layman's terms. There's 8 lessons there. So I can do those in 8 days, I can do those in 16 days, I can do those in 24 days. I can give 3 days to each lesson. So this whole unit of study then, if I did it in 3 weeks, would be character analysis. That's what we're doing. We're thinking deeply as a habit of mind about the character. And so again, if I experience these things again and again and again, it becomes very powerful. Now the assessment that matches this page, or this section, and this is where you'll really get the idea of this book, so I love to tell this story. So here's the rubric on character analysis. So there's 6 questions there that are kind of over here too. And by the way, the top questions are bold because those are the character questions. Then the next 2 questions are setting questions, so on the next page they'll be bold. But I want the learners to see the big picture. Let me read these questions. Why did the character act this way? Was it right or wrong for the character to act this way? What did the character get from acting this way? How am I like the character in this story? What is the lesson learned? How has the lesson learned changed the way I think? There's no right or wrong answer there, but you have to support your answer with evidence. Text to self, text to text, text to world. Support your thinking with evidence. So, I'm in Hong Kong International School, one of the top private schools in the world, and I'm their literacy guy for 2 years, and I'm training all their teachers because they brought in a bunch of new ones. And so I start tutoring there because the parents there will do anything and pay everything to get extra help. And so they heard I was the literacy guy, so he must be the guy I want to tutor my kid. So Bernard Luck, very close to his family still to this day, he's in 3rd grade, he's struggling a little bit with his English, and he's a little bit a late bloomer too. So I start working with Bernard using literacy mats. And so that graphic organizer and rubric I just showed you, we read fiction after fiction after fiction, and he must have answered that thing because I worked with him for 2 years there. Then when I went to Qatar, we Skyped once a week for 2 years. And so I stayed with Bernard for 4 years. He wrote to that thing over 50 times, from 3rd to 6th grade. The last one he did was the Harry Potter novel. So it was a 6-page literary essay. He answered every question with a full page and had tons of evidence, brilliant thinking. And when anybody looked at it, and see, I intentionally ordered and sequenced those questions so that if you didn't know those questions were there, you would have thought, well, God, that's some brilliant organized writing, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I said, Bernard, when you answer these questions, type all your questions in red in your Word doc and put your answers in black. When it was all done, I said, now delete all the red questions and indent and let it flow. Work your transitions a little bit. People read it and it's like, there is no way a 6th grade kid wrote this. No way. I said, yes way. He just got so comfortable with those 6 questions, it was like without even thinking. He just flew with it. He had that sense of confidence. So this is a powerful idea behind this book because it's what I call, again, recursive application. You know, it's used from 3rd grade through 12th grade. And because change is so difficult, both from a marketing standpoint, but also from a true standpoint, I say to schools, this doesn't replace anything you've got. It's a supplement. It anchors your curriculum, right? Off the shelf in the hands of all. Questions? All right, that's it. So if there's more questions, or I've given you more of what I gave you in the beginning, but there's a lot there that kind of make you think a little bit. It's provocative, and I'm glad that some of you pushed back, because it's not black and white in education, right? There's a little bit of truth, in many angles. Yes?
Is there a way to engage young parents who are not necessarily literary to get the confidence to read to their children?
That is a driving question in my work and my efforts today. And my answer right now is this. In here, all those learning points, there's 262 of them for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. 262 lessons. So we're going to begin to shoot videos this year, now that I've got my investor. And we're going to shoot videos. There's going to be 262 geared with little kids and parents and teachers geared for K through 2. Then the same 262 learning points for 3, 4, and 5. Then the same 262 for middle school. Then the same 262 for high school with leveled literature appropriate to those levels. And so those will be 10 to 15 minute video lessons, or entertainments, if you will, that you can watch that'll show, not tell, young parents, oh, I can do that.
And how do you get that information to young parents who have few resources?
Well, everything we do is going to be at our website through our portal. We'll have our own YouTube channel. We'll have a whole series like Khan Academy does. And then it's about social media marketing. It's about having commercials. It's about getting on the Oprah Winfrey Show. It's, you know, it's any way you can to get the word out, hey, check us out. But now Khan Academy has over 4 million subscribers now, you know? Yeah.
I just think this is extremely exciting.
Thank you.
I think it is wonderful.
Thank you.
I remember my former husband had his PhD, and I was taking classes at the University of Minnesota. I didn't have a clue how
Right.
to write an essay.
Right.
He gave me 5 points, very similar to what you're
Yeah.
saying. Never learned those in school. Never.
No.
He just told me, I've been told that I should write. I don't, but that's what I've been told because
Yeah.
of those 5 little, and that's exactly
Thank you.
what you've got in this book.
That's
Wonderful.
that's powerful. You know,
Exciting.
I've got to be. It's real interesting as I get out and I present this work and so forth. I'll talk to this type of an audience, and I've got your full attention, and you find this incredible. And it's like, well, why aren't we doing this? You know, this is great. This makes it user friendly. It makes so much sense. And yet, quite often when I make my first presentation to teachers, it's
Well, I'd like to speak to
yeah,
that.
yeah, please, please. This is a former superintendent, by the way, of a very successful school, so I can't wait to hear what she's got to say.
In our country,
Yeah.
generally, school boards and school superintendents and leaders tend to want short-term solutions.
Yes,
Instead of a Finland who looks ahead for 20 years.
absolutely.
The other problem for teachers regarding change, you may come in with this very provocative and
Yep.
obviously wonderful program, but they've had 20 before you, and they know that after you leave, some new superintendent and some new board is going to buy some other wonderful reading program.
That's right.
And those programs are a fortune, and they keep going through the same stuff over and over again, and teachers become bitter about it.
Absolutely.
They're cynical.
Absolutely.
And this is not unusual. It's
No.
typical.
Absolutely.
So, you know, there ought to be a law. You got to stick with something for a
Well,
long time.
Okay, let me just build on that for a moment. So, again, I want to be respectful and careful, but that's exactly what happened in Benton Harbor this last year for me.
Sure.
You know, one of the big things I do is I put in a leveled reading library of 2,000 books in every classroom. So if you're a 4th grade class, you're going to have books that go down to 2nd grade, mid-year, and all the way up to like 6th or 7th grade. So that when we do a diagnostic on you, you can pick up a book that's at your just right level. We're not forcing you to read at 4th grade level anymore. So you can feel good and excited to read it fluently. And we have all genres. Like Scholastic puts out this collection where there's 35 titles per level. 50% are fiction, 50% are nonfiction. The 50 that are fiction represent a multitude of genres like historical fiction, realistic fiction, fantasy, adventure. Nonfiction covers your science and social studies. It's a very well thought out, leveled reading library. So when I went into Benton Harbor, I said, well, we got to have this. Oh, come here. Opened up the closet. Tens of thousands of dollars of leveled books from Scholastic right there. The exact order I would make. Let's get them out now. Let's put them in the classrooms. So if I did nothing else, I put these leveled collections in every classroom. See, so it's exactly what happened. And the teachers, it took me a while to win them over, but by the end of the year, of the 15, I had about 10 really excited about me and the work we were going to do. And they looked at me, they must have kept coming to me and said, but you're not going to be here next year. I said, no, I'm going to be here. They were right. I'm not there this year. Because there was a transition and a change and politics and other things, and I'm not there this year. Yeah. So I might be there for a little bit on and off this year, but they missed their window of opportunity to have me back. I was there 3 days a week for 6 months. And that's the kind of commitment you take, but it's a 3-year process. So exactly. Yeah, please.
Is it possible that this is intentional, that people really don't want kids to excel? I've been suspicious.
So I've been provocative, but that's really provocative. And, I think, I'm sorry, but there are some people that think that way. I think there are some people that think that way, yeah. I not very many, but I don't know. I hear attitudes sometimes upon, from just really pro business people, or it's about the bottom dollar, and it's almost a subconscious thing maybe sometimes, I think, with a few. It's like, well, we've got to have some people to do, these other labor jobs or something. I don't, that's.
And there's no money. I mean, the money
Yeah.
is dried up.
Yeah.
How many districts do you go into where there's any money, a substantial amount of money in the budget for staff development? Very
Right.
few
Right.
are investing. Corporations, what
Yeah.
do? They invest in their people.
Right.
We don't.
We don't, no. But somebody's going to come back and say, we spend more money on education than any
Than
developed country. Well, we spend it in the wrong ways.
Yeah.
And other countries don't have the expense of health care like we do. So it's, let's dig down a little bit and let's unpack that. And then it's a hard one to defend.
Brian?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Last question.
Okay.
And I better make it really good.
Yeah.
I'm a retired teacher.
Mhm.
I've been through a number of the paradigm shifts,
Right.
like somebody else over here has mentioned. What I experienced was that we would have somebody like you come in and get us all fired up,
Yep.
get us ready to go on a new program design,
Right.
working together, cooperative, team building, etc. And then they would come back with a federal program that said, well, we have to give these tests, so you have to teach to these tests.
Right.
And out the window, all of your efforts for everything else that would be good for kids
Right.
went out the window because the money was being put into no child left
Right.
behind. We must teach and pass these tests. So what my question to you is, okay, so you've got these great ideas and you're going into all these schools and you're pushing
Right.
your program, but how do you counteract that?
Well, my answer these days is that I don't go into the schools anymore. And I put these lessons online. Because if I come into your classroom, I'm a threat to you. And maybe with 30% of teachers, I'm not a threat, and they just, come on, I'll take anything and everything. Yeah. But there's a certain percentage there. If you're not a threat, at least you're rocking what we call their efficacy, their sense of effectiveness and confidence, right? Well, sometimes it is for many. So, but if you're coming to watch my online videos, which model everything I do, because I'm a very unique trainer. I go into the classroom, I hand the teacher a cappuccino, I say, kick back, relax, watch me go. And then let's unpack it when I'm done, right? And that's the way I train. So I do workshops like this, but I try to go into the classrooms more often. And so, I'm less of a threat if I'm online, so that's my solution right now. But the other thing is we need a leader, a political leader who understands education. And I don't know a single known political leader in the country today that understands education. Yeah, they don't. Yeah. Yeah, they don't understand the dynamics of education. And they say, well, Brian, you ought to get into politics. And I'm like, Yeah.
Others said no.
Right, yeah, Mom said no, yeah. So, anyway, that needs to be the last question, I think, right?
It does.
Okay, and so, I'm here for a little bit if somebody wants to ask me another question or two, or I've got a few cards, and so, yeah, I got some books if somebody would, like to purchase a book. $25. $25, yeah. We're hoping to bring the price down to make it more marketable, but it's a standard textbook price, yeah. So thank you so much. It was my honor to be here today. You guys are a great audience.